You ever look at a news headline and just feel like you're missing the real story? It's like those few words are a secret code. Well, today we are going to crack that code. We're going to look at some of the biggest news stories of 2025 and learn the language that journalists use to tell us what's really going on.
I mean, how are you supposed to make sense of a headline like this one? It's designed to be understood in a split second. But what if you don't know what the words actually mean? That's a huge barrier to figuring out what's happening in the world.
Now, this is a really heavy, really important headline. It's talking about war, about people being forced from their homes, and this thing called dwindling aid. But stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to know exactly what that means and why a single word like that can paint such a powerful and honestly heartbreaking picture. So let's get into it with our first case study. Okay, let's start in the world of politics. It's a place where promises get made all the time, right? But the real question is, what happens next? And that's where our first phrase comes into play. So let's rewind to February 2025. President Trump announced these new tariffs, which are basically taxes on products being brought into the US. Now, this was a huge part of his campaign, and as you can see from this CNL headline, the key phrase everyone used to describe him actually doing it was follow through on. So what does that actually mean? Well, it's pretty simple, really. When you follow through on something, you're keeping your word. You're finishing what you started. In this headline, it's telling us that President Trump was turning his campaign talk into actual government policy. He said he'd do it, and then he did. And this isn't just for big political stuff, right? This is a phrase you see everywhere. You really hope your manager follows through on giving you that pay rise, or you'd be pretty annoyed if a friend didn't follow through on their promise to bake you a cake. It's all about seeing something through to the end, whether it's international tariffs or just a tasty prawn curry. Okay, let's move on. Now we're going to shift gears to something much heavier, a major humanitarian crisis. Back in April 2025, humanitarian groups were calling the war in Sudan the worst in the world, and the language used to talk about it is so important. Hey, remember this headline from the beginning? Well, we're back. And now we can see it's laying out two massive problems, a record number of people being forced from their homes, and this thing called dwindling aid. Let's break that down. First, to get a sense of the scale here, just look at that number. 12 million people. That's how many were forced to flee their homes because of the war. It's an absolutely staggering number. And on top of that unimaginable crisis, they were facing a second huge problem. Dwindling. It's one of those words that sounds exactly like what it means, right? Something is slowly shrinking or disappearing. So when the headline talks about dwindling aid, it means the money, the food, the medical supplies for those 12 million people was just gradually getting smaller and smaller. It paints this awful picture of a crisis that's getting worse while the help is fading away. And once you know what it means, you start seeing this powerful word pop up in all sorts of places. You might read about a politician's dwindling support after a scandal, or the dwindling hopes of finding survivors after a natural disaster. It's almost always used to describe this gradual and often really sad decline. It packs a huge emotional punch in just one word. All right, for our last case study, we're jumping into a totally different world, a dramatic crime story that had everyone talking, a super high-stakes robbery at one of the most famous museums on the planet. Picture this, October 2025, Paris, the Louvre. Thieves managed to break in and steal priceless royal jewelry. Now, as the police started their investigation, the news didn't just say they were working fast. No, they used a much more dramatic phrase, a race against time. And to really get why they used that phrase, you have to understand just how fast this all went down. The entire heist took about 7 minutes. Can you believe that? The thieves got in, grabbed 8 priceless items, and were gone, escaping on scooters into the streets of Paris. That incredible speed is what set the stage for everything that came next. So what is a race against time? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when you have this very small window to get something incredibly important done. The police believed the thieves would immediately try to break the jewels apart to sell off the individual gems. So every single minute that passed made it less likely they could get those historic items back in one piece. The clock was literally ticking. And this is a classic phrase, right? You hear it all the time in high-pressure situations. Think about rescue teams searching for survivors after an earthquake or a flood. They are always in a race against time, where every second is the difference between life and death. It instantly tells you that the stakes are as high as they can get. Okay, so we've looked at 3 totally different stories, right? politics, a massive humanitarian crisis, and a daring crime. But the thing that connects them all is the language. These phrases, they aren't just vocabulary words. They are incredibly powerful tools for telling a story. And this right here, this is basically the whole takeaway. Think of these phrases as shortcuts. Journalists use them to tell you a much bigger story in just a few words. Follow through on immediately signals a story about promises and accountability. Dwindling tells you about a slow, worrying decline. And race against time throws you right into the middle of an urgent, high-stakes drama. When you understand these, you unlock the entire narrative behind the headline.
So now, the ball's in your court. You know how to spot them. The next time you're scrolling through the news, I want you to look past the names and the places and really pay attention to the language itself. What story are those key phrases really trying to tell you?